Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Meiser Sheni, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, and God willing, going on today to Halacha Beis. We're learning today Davav, relatively early on in the Masechta, and we left off on Davav, Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid by the 2 dots by the brackets. So the Mishnah, Halacha Aleph, was teaching us about what coins may not be used to deconsecrate or to redeem Meiser Sheni on. And the Mishnah tells us that you cannot use a Matbeya She'einu Yoitze, a coin that's not spendable, as the Gemara right now will elaborate a bit more what that means, nor, says the Mishnah, nor may you not be poidem, may you not redeem Meiser Sheni, al mo'is she'enon b'reshusai, on money that's not in his or her domain. That's also something that's going to be explained today in the Gemara. Through this sugya, we will learn something very interesting, that Bisman Habayis, or at least at times Bisman Habayis, in the ideal time, Bisman Beis HaMikdash, all of the currencies in the world were accepted and actually circulated in Yerushalmi Ir HaKodesh. And that's going to be very helpful when it comes to what types of currencies may be used to redeem Meiser Sheni on, as we will see in our Gemara. It's really a little bit of a hemshech, even though we took a shtickle Pesach break, but the first Amid today is going to be a real continuation of the topic that we learned on Daf Hey Amid Beis, etc. And on Daf Vav Amid Beis, we're going to start the second Mishnah in this Masechta, the new Mishnah, Halacha Beis. And after the Mishnah teaches us what types of coins are allowed and should be used when someone is going to redeem their Meiser Sheni, these coins are taken to Yerushalayim, and the rule is that you can only be mechalel the ma'os, you can only use those coins on items that are edible, as we will see. And what happens is that when a person takes those coins and they buy food, just to make it clear, the kedusha leaves the coins. That means that the vendor who sold the food can use those coins for whatever the vendor wants. The coins can be taken out of Yerushalayim. The coins have no restrictions. And now the new food is imbued with the original kedusha of Meiser Sheni, has to be consumed, and it has to be consumed inside the walls of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Okay, that's the premise of Halacha Beis. Now, what's very interesting is, if you think about it, is that there are many food items, whether natural, whether not natural, that they come in a container, and the container is not edible. Natural, every behemoth, the oil, the hide, the skin of the animal is inedible. When you buy an animal, you're buying the animal, you're buying the skin. And by the way, the skin is very valuable. When you buy jugs of wine, this is not natural. You know, there are different ways of how people sold wine. There were many times that people in the market had open barrels, and it was the lekeach, the purchaser, would bring their own keli. That would be one way they would sell wine. There were many times that the vendor sold sealed barrels. In other words, the way we buy it now. Now it's even a bottle, that the buyer buys the wine and he buys the container. The bottle is inedible. And other examples that the Mishnah will give. So the question is, how do you do that? You're only allowed to use the money to buy food items. How can you buy a behemoth? How can you buy a kad of yayin? And the Mishnah teaches us the law. In the Bavli, the word havla'ah is used. Maybe it's going to be used later here, not used in the Mishnah. And the word havla'ah either means literally swallowed in, included, incidental, thrown in, many ways of how to interpret the word havla'ah. The concept of havla'ah would mean, as it's applied in our case, that when a person buys a behemoth, we say that the hide is incidental. The money of Meiser Sheni is only deconsecrated on the meat part, on the edible part, because that's the ikar part of the purchase. We view that as primary. Same thing with the wine in the barrel. Same thing with the nut in a shell, as the Mishnah gives other examples. And that's a machaya. Then you have no problem. The only thing is, the Mishnah will give scenarios where we will not apply the rule of havla'ah. Just as one example, there is a rabbinic prohibition. Let's remember that, to use Meiser Sheni money on a behemoth in Yerushalayim, when you're deconsecrating it, if that animal is not right away consecrated as a zevach shlamim. In other words, you're not chayiv to use the meiser sheni for a carbon. You're not chayiv to do so. Fine, you can buy an apple. If you're buying an animal, ideally, even midoiraisa, you should buy an animal as a carbon. By the way, you're going to eat the animal anyways. You're not losing anything. It's kache kalim. Anyways, meiser sheni can only be consumed in Yerushalmi. The parts of the animal that are offered on the mizbeach are parts of the animal that anyways you can't eat. And even though that the kohanim get a part of the shlamim, I would say by a chulin they also get parts of the animal. They get different parts. By chulin they get the zroya, the l'chayayim, and the kevel. Okay. By shlamim we just read it in the parsha. By the shlamim they get the chazay and the shoik. In other words, you're not losing anything. And even if you're losing, point is that lechatchila midoiraisa you should use it for a carbon. You know what the chachamim said? If you are buying a behema, that's not a balmum. If you're buying a behema, it has to be a shlamim. And if not, you're violating the Rabbanan. When you violated the Rabbanan do not allow the law of Havlah to take place. And the Mishnah will give other examples. And here will be the question. Was I have mois meiser sheni, I'm buying an animal, there's something wrong the way I'm doing it. We're not going to use the word Havlah, the concept of Havlah. So now part of the money went for the hide. The hide is inedible. So now the question is, how will we view the hide? How will we view the whole purchase? This is something that the Mishnah doesn't explicitly spell out. God willing, we'll have enough time at the end of today's shir. We're going to quote a little bit of a machlokes amaroim that we're going to have later on of how to understand what we do. We just know from our Mishnah that there's no havlah. But what do we have? That's something that will be elaborated as we go into the sugya. But Chevra, we're starting on Davav Amud Aleph again. We're starting 4 lines from the top of the Amud by the brackets. This is a very simple sugya. All right, about what type of coins or currencies could or could not be used to be poida the meiser sheni. And the Mishnah says that one of the restrictions are v'loy al hamatbeya she'ena yoytza. You cannot deconsecrate or you cannot redeem the peiros meiser sheni onto a coin that's not spendable, nor v'loy al hamoy she'enon b'reshusay, nor on money that's not in your domain. And both of these will be explained right now. So Tani, we begin quoting a Tosefta. Ein mechalal in oisoi. Now listen to the words. Loy al hamois shekan. Guys, in Yerushalmi, here means the Holy Land. You cannot deconsecrate it on Israeli money. Mo'i shekan means today would be the shekel chadashim, sheks, as my kids call it. You cannot do that if the peiros are in Bavel. I want to emphasize, it's not about where you are, it's about where the peiros and the money are. So if you have peiros in Bavel, and let's say you're in Bavel, and like all of us that currently live chutz la'aretz, in my drawer I have a lot of shkolim. Next time you travel, you have not a halavai a lot of a few narish shkolim, a shwama enough of shkolim. I have it sitting in my drawer. So what would happen if you have a yid that wants to redeem the peiros on the money of? Now you would think money of Eretz Yisrael. Where will it be used? It's going to be used in Yerushalmi. So it's a currency that when you're going to use it, it will be the right currency. Doesn't matter. Since not you, the fruits are in Bavel. In Bavel, currency of Eretz Yisrael was not spendable. It's not yoitza. You can't go to the market in Bavel. Can't go to the market here in LA and use shkolim. Maybe on Pico, maybe a store, but that's an anomaly. That's not the rule. That's what you cannot do. So, ein mechalal in oisay loy al hamo'oy shekan, on Israeli money, if the peiros are in Bavel, and even v'loy al mavas al Bavel, if you have the fruit here meaning here in Eretz Yisrael, and you have Babylonian currency here in Eretz Yisrael. Again, the chiddush is even though the money is valid in Bavel, it's not the way we learned. If you remember before Pesach, you have certain currencies that the king, vayomas vayakam melech chadash, and it's a new king, it's a new currency. We're not talking about a currency that's not valid anywhere. It's a currency that's valid in Bavel. And more than that, well, as we'll see today, that Bavel to Eretz Yisrael is a place where shahashayorois mitsuyois, which means that the travel between these two countries were very common and very affordable, which makes you even think, well, Mela from some who knows where. It's Bavel. There were roads that were Yiddish roads. There were roads, we learned to some Masechta Shabbos, that they would build on the roads. They would do wells. So when Yidden are going from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael or back, they will be able to rest Shabbos on the side of the roads, and there'll be water for them to drink. Mitapasim, in other words, it was roads with kosher hotels on the way. Doesn't matter. That's what the Braisa says. That's the meaning. Where is the fruit? Where is the currency? They have to match. And the Gemara elaborates when it says in the Tosefta, "V'loy alamoy shekan," not an Israeli currency. Bibavel, it means even when you are in Bavel, Verstehst? So, it's not that you are in a different place. You're there. Doesn't matter. Because since in Bavel, the currency of Eretz Yisrael is not spendable, you're doing the pidyon in the place of the peiros. Can't do that. V'loy al hamoy shekan, meaning even though you're standing over here, doesn't matter. Since the money of Bavel is not spendable here, so therefore, even though you were paid it didn't have any effect. Now, not having any effect, just to make it clear what that means. That means that the fruits remain imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni, and the ma'os are completely chulin. What you did was completely ineffective. You asked
Rabbi,
me, yes.
was there like a back then like nowadays like a dollar that is mekubal on everybody that you could have bought it with that whatever coin?
One more time.
Like nowadays, you have the dollar, right? It's mekubal everywhere you go.
The Gemara is going to say that in a moment. The Gemara will speak about it in a moment. We're gonna unpackage it. Now, what I was the one that said, because I learned yesterday that it's not about where you are, it's about where the fruit and the money is. That's what the Gemara is going to say right now. The Gemara is going to elaborate. All right. If the money is Babylonian money, even though you're standing over here, okay? Money is there. You're standing over here. Says the Gemara, Neymar, we say, it's a nice expression, kama, that im hoisa derech besucha, that if the shayaros mitzuyos, if you can travel easily back and forth, in other words, guys, you have Babylonian money, it's in Bavel, the fruit is in Bavel, you're standing over here, then it's okay. Even if you're standing in Eretz Yisrael, here always means Eretz Yisrael, mechalal. Here's where the Gemara makes it clear that it doesn't matter if the person, I can do an act of pidyon even if I'm not together with the money and with the fruit. If I know that in my home can be in a different country, I have the peiros meiser sheni, I have a bag of money, I can make a statement that the kedusha from this should be a nifda in that, and it's going to be effective. It doesn't matter where you are. What we do care is that the money and the fruit are in the same place. And then the Gemara adds another detail. But at the end of the day, you're far away from it. So for that, we have to have shayaris mitzuyos. In other words, if I'm far away from my money and fruit, and it's difficult to travel, we wouldn't say that. That's why he's emphasizing that im hoisa derech besucha, then mechalal, you could make that statement even though you're far away. But the im lav, then ein mischalal. Now I just want to say one second. And why ein mischalal? Not because the money is ein yoitzer, because the Mishnah said, the Gemara quoted it in the header, because you can't use ma'ois she'einon b'reshusai. That's the next thing. What does it mean, money that's not b'reshusai? B'reshusi doesn't mean it's in my drawer in my house. B'reshusi means it's easy for me to access it, even if it's in a different country. Even though travel costs money, but it's the normal cost. If it's easy to get, that's just to make it clear. Because of the ma'os she'enam b'reshusay. Even over there, the fact that the peiros and the money are in this are the money is the currency that is used in the location of the peiros. That's called matbeya. That yes, yoitze. Yeah, what were you saying?
Saying like you don't have to wait until the money gets to Israel.
No, you don't have to wait. And the Gemara wonders, hold on, how can you say that im hoise derech pesucha mechalol? I have a practical question. What's my practical question, Aviv? How can you redeem the money in Bavel for the fruits that are in Bavel? Okay, let's go. So it's effective. So what's going to happen? You're going to have Babylonian currency that are holy. And what could you use with it? Only one thing, which is buy peiros bishuke Yerushalayim. But you can't do that. It's like a practical question. Like it's not going to be accepted. So the Gemara, look at these expressions. The tavavu kain. So then is does good from toiv. Is this okay? Is this? It doesn't make sense. Why not? Because you're talking about you're going to have Babylonian dollars. What can you do with it? So Amar Rab Oven, you should know that kol hamatbeya yotzes b'Yerushalayim mipnei kain. That because of the Torah allowing people to be paid their peiros on their local currency, on matbeya sheyoytze b'mekoymam, that in Yerushalayim, the goyim lahavdil, the klipa, the impurity, they pick up on something. Tuma, international city. Of course, it's an international city. The Torah calls it an international. First of all, it's international because loinis chalka l'shvatim, number one, and number two, because Yerushalayim was a place that all of the currencies of the world were accepted in Yerushalayim. It's the center of the world. Yidden from all around the world would go to Yerushalayim. It's not that you needed to go to the bank to exchange your money. Now, was this always in effect? No, it wasn't always in effect. I'm going to speak something out in a moment. Like there's a contradiction here in the Gemara. But that's part of the beauty of Yerushalayim. No matter what currency you had, you can spend it in Yerushalayim. And that's al shem. According to Pasik, Yefei Noif. It's the fairest of all cities. And not only that, Misoy is called the joy of all the earth. What's the joy of all the earth? Part of the joy of all the earth is that whatever currency you have, you can spend in Yerushalayim. Okay. So now I have a problem. And all the commentators ask, why can I not redeem? If I have currency of Bavel in Eretz Yisrael, if I have currency of Bavel in Eretz Yisrael, we just said I cannot use the currency for my fruits in Eretz Yisrael. We just said like a contradiction. If in Yerushalayim all of the currencies are used, why are you calling it matbeya she'eino yoitze? And the answer is because the Tosefta is the one that said that. The Tosefta, which was compiled by the Tanoim, all as an extension of what Rabbeinu HaKadosh did when he compiled the Mishnah, the Erech, in the Goyish year of 198, speaking about over 100 years after the Churban of the second Beis HaMikdash, that was different. The Romans did not allow Yerushalayim to be a center. In other words, the Braisa that we learned is takanat bisman habayis. It's takanat where we saw in a revealed way that Yerushalayim is and always is. Baruchni is always, but it wasn't materialized in Mesois Kol Haaretz. That's very important. Yeah, Danny.
I'll take one step back. This idea of you're not together with your produce and your money.
That doesn't matter.
So I'm curious, what's the actual mechanism for doing it? I'm in Eretz Yisrael, but my payers are in Bavel, and my Babylonian money is in Bavel.
Yeah.
So what should I be doing?
It's a verb. It's done b'dibur. In other words,
I can take my shkolim in Eretz Yisrael and say, hey, I'm transferring the value of those payers that are in Bavel onto my
100%
money here, and that's really what he should be doing.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the moist and the fruit doesn't have to be together.
Well, no, I take it back. If the moist and the fruit have to be together, can't do that, Danny.
So then,
One second, I want to go back.
Talking about him being in another country.
We want the currency has to be in the same place of the fruit. Even though the currency will ultimately only be spent in Yerushalayim, when the Mishnah says it has to be v'loy al she'ena yoytzei, you're deconsecrating it the local.
I can't be in Eretz Yisrael with shkolim and say, all right, I'm going to deconsecrate my fruits that are in Bavel on my shkolim.
No, you can't do that. But 1 second, you can do it. You can deconsecrate it on ma'os that are with it.
Okay.
Then one tap.
Then
Get that. If you're there, it's
You gotta go back.
then someone has to take that money here.
Somebody has to.
Yeah.
The money has to be.
And I'll tell you even more. We just learned in the beginning, the first few daf, that part of this whole din was to make sure people go to Yerushalayim. It's going to make someone else come here. Part of this whole din of Ma'aser Sheni is to incentivize people to go to Yerushalayim. Okay. Daf Vav Amid Beis. Now, this is really going to be Al Moy She'enon B'Reshusai. We're going to clarify what that means. You might think that if you had money in Har HaMelech, Har HaMelech is shame, is a place, right? Har HaMelech we have in the Churban in Mesechtas Gittin. Katzra, the Mara full the right shame Medina, and Ve'ir Melucha Shalom Mukefes Chayma Mimais Yeshua Ben Nun. It's a big chash of a city. You might think that what? That Machalal and Aleim, Talmud Loimer, Vitzarto HaKesev Biyotcha, that the money has to be in your hand. What's the meaning of your hand? I can be far away, like we just learned. I can be in the Holy Land. I can have money in my drawer in Bavel. I can have produce in Bavel and be Mechalalit Peiros on the money, because going from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael was Derech Psucha, was Shayaris Mitzuyos. But if you have the money in a place where the travel was difficult, okay, Ein Shayaris Mitzuyos doesn't mean that there's a war. It just means that when this statement was written, the Har HaMelech's trip to Yerushalayim, Katzra to Yerushalayim, was an uncommon route. It was something unusual. It would be very expensive. However, it's not a normal trip. You cannot do that, because when the Torah says Vitzarta HaKesev Biyotcha, we learned last week 2 pshatim in Vitzarta before Pesach. Either Vitzarta, Rabdoisa the Chachamim. Either it means just bundle. Fakir, that's Rabdoisa's proof. It doesn't have to be a minted coin. We paskin Vitzarta from Vitzura. There has to be a king imprinted in it. But here we're learning from the words Biyotcha. Biyotcha doesn't mean begashmius in your hand. It means, in the Talmudic expression, it's biyotcha lasois. Ma biyotcha, the meaning is b'reshuscha. That's gewaldig. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yoina boy, the word boy here again, like many times, doesn't mean a question, it means a statement. What happens if nafal kisoy lebar, if you have a wallet, aviv, uboy meya riboy, how much is 100 times 10,000? Is 1 million. You have 1 million shkolim in it, and what happens? It fell into a boy, fell into a pit, a very deep pit. Now, if you have to spend 500,000 to bring it up, so how much do you have b'reshuscha? You have 500,000. We don't say you don't have anything. When it comes, interestingly, to Har HaMelech and Katzra, the Gemara doesn't say that since it's Ein Shayaras Mitzuyas, let's say the trip costs $5,000 to go, Mele, the $10,000 is worth $5,000. We don't say that. It sounds like you cannot use it at all. It's not near you, and it's unusual. Here, it's right in front of you. You see it in the bottom of the pit. But since you have to spend 500,000 to raise it, so the Rabbi Yoina says that oisan chamishim riboy kamoy shehem b'reshusay. Don't tell me, since it's very expensive to get it, you cannot use any of it. That's not true. Deduct the money you have to spend, and the rest, it's there. So we do consider that in your domain. In other words, being, the way I understand it, being far away and difficult does not allow you to use it at all. If it's near and difficult, then we deduct the difficult. We monetize the difficult, deduct it from the value, and then you could use it because it's there. So there is something about proximity. It's not a nothing, the proximity. Okay, Atkan, this will get all good. See, big statements, big differentiations. Now comes halacha base. Like we mentioned in the words of introduction, that, okay, the first Mishnah told you what coins could and cannot be used. Okay, now you applied it on coins. Now you're taking the coins to Yerushalmi, and in Yerushalmi only you have to buy food items. You may not spend it on inedible items. What's going to happen? Again, like we spoke in the intro, you're buying something that has both, like a behemoth. It has food, and then it has the oil, and the kanayim, and the teflayim. We just learned last week, the derivatives that are inedible. So says the Mishnah. The first case is when you use the money for ideally that which you should use, which is halikeach behema. You bought a domesticated animal. That means an animal that is ra'ui to go on the mizbeach, and you bought it lizivchei shlamim. You bought it right away with the kavana of being magdishit as a shlamim. Look inside the top maraful, and right the last line on top of the gemara. And you use mima ois ma'aser sheni. And why does the Mishnah begin with this example? Shekain hu iker mitzvahs ma'ois ma'aser sheni. This is the main way that one should expend that money, which is liknois mehem shlamim, and that's actually a chazal. The alfinon, we make a gzeira shava sham, like gzeira shava mahar eval, and we're going to have this later in the Gemara. So if you spend the money in the most ideal way, you don't have to spend it. You can buy an apple. The first example is you bought the ideal, the mitzvah min hamufchar, which is you bought a carbon. Problem with the carbon is the challenge is that part of the animal is inedible. Or another example. Doesn't have to be only behemoth as if shlamim. You bought a chaya. A chaya is not ra'ui to go on the mizbeach, which is fine. It's same issue, which is aviv, that the animal, any animal, even if it's a non-domestic, a kosher deer, okay, basar taiva. Basar taiva is the name of all animals that are not to be put on the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. So what's the problem? Problem is, well, first of all, this animal is chulin. So whether you bought kachim, whether you bought chulin, so the Mishnah says yotza ha'oir l'chulin, the hide. I know the words yotza sounds like it was holy, and then it goes out to be chulin. We're not talking about from kachim to chulin. We're talking about from kedushas ma'aser sheni to chulin. Most of the Rishonim learn that here Yotza means it in lechatchila was never consecrated, then we're going to follow that shita throughout. Again, I'm not talking about the kachim aspect. I'm talking about the pidyon ma'aser sheni, that the oil was never included. It was never in. It always remains chulin. And even when she'ha'oid meruba ala basar afal pi she'ha'oid, meaning even though the value of the oil sometimes will be more valuable than the meat, the determinant of ikir and tafel when you purchase something, what's considered primary, what's considered secondary, and why is that important? So we're going to use words that we have in the Bavli, havla'a, applied here. Havla'a means, I'll give you one case of havla'a before we come to here. The schar Shabbos is something lechatchila a person shouldn't pay. Lechatchila, which means if I hire a worker, of course, to do something that a worker is allowed to do for me. You hire a shiksa to clean your house. She can't do things that you cannot do, but she can do things that you can do. Person who has help in their house. Person has help in the shul. Lechatchila, don't pay them only for the work they did on Shabbos. That's called schar Shabbos that you should not do. Should not. I know that people are very lenient in it. Okay, first of all, it's not a doiraisa, it's a derabanan. I'm not minimizing the rabbanans, but how should lechatchila you pay someone who works for you? It's called havla. Havla means that, let's say I pay a worker now $20 an hour, $25 an hour, whatever you pay. So lechatchila, don't only have them work for you for Shabbos. They worked 5 hours. Shabbos, $20 an hour, $100. That's more problematic. If they worked also during the week, whenever, and then I make a sum total of the hours. So I'm paying them $100 for the 1 hour Sunday, and Behavla, they're getting, right? We had this by the Dalet Minim, when you have an issue with Shviz. Remember that? And the Gemara, the Lulav was the most expensive. Now the Esrog, You make the transaction on that which is permissible, and everything else is muvla, swallowed, incidental. So let's apply it over here. It's not if you're going to spend money on the animal, if you're going to look at the money went for the animal, then if it was deconsecrated, then the hide should have kedushas ma'aser sheni. And what would happen if the hide has kedushas ma'aser sheni? What do you think you would have to do with it? Then you would have to sell the hide, and it's money only used for food items to only be eaten in Yerushalmi. Well, it's no one is saying that because it's ma'aser sheni you eat the oil. But there is a way of saying, well, it has the restrictions of ma'aser sheni, and it has to be eaten in Yerushalmi. We don't say that. And we're going to use the words, yotza means, lechatchila, we say, even though the hide is more valuable, so when you spend $5,000 to buy a cow, be'emes, why did you pay $5,000? Because the people in the leather business will pay $3,000 for the hide. And the butcher will pay you $2,000 for the meat. Doesn't matter the number. A living animal is viewed as the iked is meat. That's why I went back to primary. An animal is viewed as meat, whether it's more or less in the value. And therefore, we halachically have the right when we want to use the instrument of havlah. We don't always use it. But when we use havlah, I can always argue the oil is considered tafel to the meat. How is it tafel? Tafel means, you have to get what I'm saying now. You can say tafel, and therefore it's also holy. You can say tafel, and therefore you didn't violate by spending the money for non-food because it's tafel. I'm saying more than that. Tafel means all of the money was deconsecrated only on the meat. Only on the meat. The hide was never included in that pidyon or in that act of chilul. That's the accurate. Pidyon is the peiros on the money, and chilul is money in Yerushalayim on the food item. Similarly, if you have kadayayin sesumais, this word sesumais is very important. Sesumais means that the vendor who sells the wine does not sell it to buyers who come with their own kalim. He sells the wine sealed in the barrel, the way we buy wine today. In other words, this is the way it's done. It's not optional, because then it's more problematic. Because if the seller is selling it in a way where the buyer can bring the buyer's bottle jug, then how can you use the money for the barrel? The barrel is not edible, but that's the way it's sold. It's like an animal comes in hide. This wine comes in a bottle, comes in a jug. So if Makaim Shadar Kamli Machar Sesumais, as I just explained, another example of what? Of applying the principle of Havla'ah the way we are applying it, which would mean the ikir is the wine. The pidyon, the chilul only went on the wine. The container that's inedible was never included in the chilul. It's included in the sale, not included in the chilul. And therefore, it never became imbued with kedushas ma'aser sheni. Yotza kan l'chulin, and therefore you don't say, "Ooh, now I'm chayiv to wait until the wine ends to sell the barrel, to monetize it, and then use the money to buy food." We don't say that. Two of the vills. You can take the barrel, whatever. The barrel is normal chulin barrel. The final example the Mishnah gives, again, this is going to be back to something natural, where food comes in a container that is inedible, that goizim, b'hashkedim, whether walnuts or almonds, that both grow b'teva in klipos that are inedible, you are buying them in their shells. Here also, we view the klipa as secondary. We apply the principle of havlah. We say that the chilul only went on the food item, and lechatchila, the klipos, which have some value, which could be monetized, don't have any restrictions of ma'aser sheni. Yatzu klipeim l'chulin. Now, another example before we come to the final case of the Mishnah, where the Chachamim don't allow you to use havla'ah. Before we get to that, let's quote a part of the Mishnah that we already quoted before in the Masechta, and that is when it comes to temed. Temed is after the grapes were transformed into wine. At some point, what you have left over are shemarim. And let's speak about shemarim. That means you have the in the bottom of the barrel. The shemarim we learned I think by the wine, I think it goes to the top, right? By the oil, it goes to the bottom. Yeah. By the wine, we learned in the previous Masech, it goes to the top. You skim it off the top. People would take that and then they would put water in it. They would have the water soak in the shemarim, and some of the taste would go into the water, and that was called temid. So the Mishnah says, now, another detail, even though, okay, Maisa Sheni has to go for food, water is not considered food. Wine is, oil is. Water is not mazin. It doesn't have in it a certain type of nutrient for it to be classified as food. Food is hazon. There are nutrients. Water is an essential. Water is what carries the nutrients around in your body. But water itself, it doesn't have the nutrients. As another area in halacha, we just learned an Rambam not that long ago, Hilchas Eidavin, right? When you're making a ruve tchumen, for example, what can you not use? Or Eidav shitav mavois. Eidav tchumim. You can't use mayim. You can't use melach. Even though these are essentials to life, but they're not mazin. Same thing over here. So hatemed, no, it's if temed is viewed as water, then you can't buy it with mois ma'aser sheni. If temed is viewed as wine, so how do you define it? So unlike we had before, remember that was the Mishnah that we quoted, right? How much liquid do you have? Do you have the same amount? Do you have a bigger amount? Anyways, wine in the times of Chazal was watered down, whether it was 3-1 or whether it was 2-1. Our Mishnah doesn't go into that. Our Mishnah goes into something completely different, related different. Did it ferment? If it fermented, means wine. Wine, you're allowed to buy Ma'aser Sheni. So says the Mishnah, if it didn't ferment, the way I understand it, we don't know if it's going to ferment. If it didn't ferment, I'm going to go on the premise it will not ferment. Why will it not ferment? Because the quantity of juice coming from the shemarim is so little that it's nullified in the water. Water doesn't ferment. So how do we know that it's halachically classified as water? Because it retains the characteristic of water that it doesn't ferment. So if it did, I'm saying that fermenting is a siman. I'm saying that maybe if I were to know, because of today's science, that this will ferment, maybe you can already use it right now. Maybe. No, since it didn't ferment, I'm going to give it the classification of water, and therefore, einoi nilkach bekesev meiser. But misha hechmitz, once it ferments, siman or siba, maybe it can go either way, then yes, nilkach bekesev meiser, because it's not considered water, it's not sold as wine, it's sold as temed. This temed, dinoi kedin yayin. Food is dafka, that which you use, meiser sheni mo'is, to consume.
Even if it doesn't ferment, it still has a taste.
So that's the whole point, that the taste is not the ikir. It's not about the taste, it's about the alcohol.
If let's say you buy a drink that has, let's say you buy a soda, you cannot use that?
You can think about this. I would say if, all theoretically, if the soda has in it additives that are mazin, that soda has in it additives that are sam hamavis, that we know. But whether it has additives like sugar, l'chayda sugar is considered something that gives you it's mazin, not like salt. I'm not saying that sugar is healthy. It's not about health.
Pain fuel, but
it has to do with that. Huh? Even if it wouldn't ferment. Sugar gives you energy. Sugar has energy in it. Something in sugar. Okay. Now let's go to two scenarios in which the rule of Havlah is not applied. Case number one is, and in both cases is because the person did something that he should not have done. Not he should not have done vis-a-vis hilchos, chilul, ma'os, ma'aser sheni. For other reasons. Not done because of the Torah, because of a halach. Number one, halakei achaya lezivchei shlamim, which is something that you should not do. You should buy, when you are buying something for a carbon, you should buy something that is fit to go on the altar. When you buy a chaya viv is an animal that's not fit to go on the mizbeach. Just to know what will be the halacha. People now in Daf Yomi are learning menachas, we're learning kachim. So what happens? When you buy an animal and you say, this is for a shlamim, but God says, no, this cannot go on the mizbeach. So instead of it being imbued with kedushas mizbeach or with kedushas haguf, that cannot happen. It is imbued with kedushas damim, and by the way, not kedushas damim lebedek habayis, with a higher level of kedusha. This animal has to go on the altar. How? You sell it, and its proceeds are going to be used to buy a behemoth that's going to go on the mizbeach. But such a purchase should not have been made. When you buy something designated as a carbon, you know what you should buy? An animal that's a roi to go in the mizbeach. So this person did something that he shouldn't have done. Again, not shouldn't have done because of the laws of Ma'aser Sheni. They shouldn't have done because of the laws of Kachim. Similar. Ubehema lebesara taiva. So we learned the first marafulda. Now let's add another important detail. Miderabanan. If you are using the mois Ma'aser Sheni to buy a behema, the Chachamim says you have to buy it right away for it to be used as a shlamim. That's a rabbinic law. And if I bought a behema that could go on the mizbeach, any one of the three types, right? Cattle, sheep, or goats. If you are buying a behema, you have to buy it midrabanan as a carbon. And if a person said, no, I'm buying it lebasar taiva, I'm buying it for me, the way you buy meat today. I'm buying an animal for it to be slaughtered, that's all mine. Yeah, I'm going to give the zroy, the l'chaim, and the keva. Who cares? But it's so since you violated the rabbinic law in both cases, first case, second case, the chachamim therefore don't allow you to use havlah. So there is no havlah. And since there's no havlah, now you have the problem we were addressing. What's the problem? You took money of Ma'aser Sheni. You really gave it for an animal. The animal, you paid $5,000 for all of the animal, including the edible parts, including the inedible parts. So the inedible parts, lo yotza ha'oid l'chulin. We don't say havlah. Okay, now what the Mishnah sagt nicht is, what does that mean? What does it mean that we don't say havlah? So I want you to know that we're going to have, God willing, tomorrow, the Amoyre Rabbi Lazar, and in the Bavli we have Rav Ami. They understand these words of the Mishnah of loy yotza ha'oir l'chulin to mean that the entire transaction is void. Why is it void? Since the money was also used for non-food items, not only, also, the whole thing is void. In other words, the funds were not deconsecrated. You know what that means, Aviv? I want to go through that detail. I bought, let's say you had an animal, and I used my mois Ma'aser Sheni to buy your animal. In this case, I bought your I bought a sheep, and I said, no, not for a carbon. There are two things that are happening here. There is a sale. A sale is a legal thing where you know what a sale means. And then there is, through the sale, the kedusha went from my money into the animal. If the kedusha did not go into the animal, doesn't mean the sale was voided. It means the animal is not b'chlal imbued with Ma'aser Sheni, and you, the seller, now you have money. Your money remains mois Ma'aser Sheni. Now, can you void the sale because of it? Could be. You can say such a money I didn't want to accept, but no. People should not confuse. There's a sale part, hilchos kinyan, and then there is a hilchos. No, it's not about. In other words, according to Rabbi Lazar and Avami, even the meat doesn't have kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. Rabbi Yochanan, however, says no. The sale is effective, meaning that all of it becomes invested with kedushas Ma'aser Sheni, all of it. And now that means that you have to take the hide, and you have to be careful. You cannot take the hide outside of Yerushalmi. You have to sell the hide in Yerushalmi, and then with the money, so the kedusha keeps on going further. So then the kedusha goes to the hide and to the money. Now the money has kedushas mois Ma'aser Sheni, and now with the money I have to buy food items that I'm going to consume inside Yerushalayim. That's Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar that we'll get to, God willing, that we'll get to tomorrow. You know what? No, I'm sorry. I know it's 7 o'clock. I just want to finish the Mishnah. I know. Says the Mishnah. Same thing, just the same rule. If you're buying jugs of wine, these jugs of wine, the seller sometimes sells them with a container, but the seller is open to sell it that you bring your container. So it's not that the container always comes along. Here also, same achloikas. And finally, third case, not the egoism, but sale to einem v'sale anovim, baskets. You didn't have to buy it with the basket. If you bought it ima keli, which means you also paid for the keli. Here also, lo yatsu demei akeli lechulin. In other words, figs and grapes are generally sold without a basket. To make it very clear, because it's sold without a basket. You bought it with the basket, you paid more money, like today in the markets. You pay for the bag. You are not allowed to pay for the bag with Mois Meiser Sheni. So either, again, let Rabbi Lazar, no pidyon happened. Let Rabbi Yochanan, the Kedusha goes into the bag. And now you have to be mindful about what you do with the bag. To be
Right.
continued.
What about the exchange rate?
What about the exchange rate?
So the money you brought is going to not be the same amount. You have to pay.
That's not true, because if you have to now take the bag, and it's if the ad